for three. Dagger!
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to episode 6 of Well Beyond the Arc. I'm Manoli.
And I'm Montana.
And we'll be bringing you NBA basketball talk here for the next hour or so. As always, a 6-pack of podcasts. What number 6, Montana? How do we make it this far?
I don't know. It's really flown by. It still feels like we're in the first few, but we're really getting into it now
Yeah.
with the 6th one. So it's exciting stuff for sure.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. And, speaking of having fun, we're on to the second round of the playoffs, the conference semifinals, and we got some fun matchups right here. And, the first one that got kicked off yesterday, Milwaukee Bucks and Boston Celtics. And Milwaukee went in there and stole one yesterday, beating the Celtics by, I believe, a final score of 101-89. Giannis Antetokounmpo led the way as always for the Bucks. They had Chris Middleton out, and it seems like he's going to be out for the whole series. But Bucks didn't shoot so well. How did you feel that game went, Montana?
Well, I think it showed how the series is going to go. I think the Bucks are going to control it. I personally think we're going to see a 5-game or sweep. You're not playing the Nets anymore. You're playing the real. One of the best teams in the East. You're not playing the fake best team in the East. You're playing the real best team in the East, most likely. So I think that this Celtics team is going to be as overwhelmed as they were last night. Giannis did not have the greatest game, obviously shooting-wise. The whole team as a whole didn't have a great game, and they still held on and dominated the whole game. So I think we really saw the depth of this team. I think we saw just how deep they can go because when one player is not on, another player can be called up and do a great job of putting up the numbers they need. So this Bucks team has some of the best depth in the NBA, and we're definitely seeing it, especially in this series. Took care of the Bulls pretty easily. That may shift in the coming years, but this season they took care of them pretty well, regular season and postseason. But you're not playing the Nets anymore. You're playing the Bucks, and you're going head to head against arguably the best player in the NBA. Giannis is kind of in that position now, I would say. People have said LeBron, Kevin Durant, this, that, but I would say Giannis absolutely is in that best player in the NBA position now, especially best player in the postseason. By far the best player in the postseason. All of the NBA, I would say as well. So this Celtics team has their hands full. If they can't turn things around, I think if they lose game 2, I think it's get the brooms out.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, I think it was a statement win for the Bucks yesterday. I agree. I like your shots fired. If you're not playing the fake best team in the East right now, you're playing the best team. With respect to Miami and Philly, which we'll talk about a little later on. But look, you think that you're waiting for the Bucks to miss Chris Middleton, and it hasn't happened yet. And don't get me wrong, that's an all-star. That's an above-average defender. That's another guy on there. You talked about the Bucks' depth that they could be using right now, and the Bucks are much better with Chris Middleton than without. But it's been a next man step up mentality for the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, Giannis Antetokounmpo, as usual, has led the way. Like you said, didn't have the best game. He's having a little bit of an issue, I think, with foul trouble once again and getting some of those offensive fouls. Is Boston's using the old blueprint of loading up the box against him and taking their chances and drawing charges against him, or at least trying to. But the key for Milwaukee going forward, and it has been for the last few years, and will continue to be, is having those other guys hit outside shots, whoever it may be, because Antetokounmpo is always going to be looking to score from close range. He's going to be looking to drive to the basket, get to the free throw line, or if guys collapse, he's able to find the open shooter. And the Bucks are one of the best teams in the league in making that second or third pass as well. But you have guys like Grayson Allen, my favorite player in the NBA, and I cannot be more sarcastic in saying that. But give credit where credit's due. He's shooting about 60% from three-point land in the postseason. You got guys like Wes Matthews. He's hitting shots to no one's surprise. Even Drew Holiday, Bobby Portis hitting threes from the corner yesterday, and he can hit that outside shot. Pat Connaughton. When George Hill comes back from injury, when they decide to activate him, I mean, he's a guy that can hit an outside shot. So the Bucks have done a good job of loading their roster with a bunch of 3-and-D guys and guys that can hit an outside shot to complement the Greek Freak. Hell, I almost forgot about Chris Middleton, another guy that can hit an outside shot. But once he comes back, they're just going to be even that more dangerous. With that being said, I don't necessarily agree that it's going to be a short series. I think Boston has a little bit of depth as well. They got a bunch of 3-and-D guys. I think it's going to be a good series. They shot 33% from the field yesterday. The ball did not move as freely as it did against Brooklyn. So they're gonna have to make an adjustment. And the Celtics coach Ime Udoka has shown that he can make adjustments through the series and even from in a series through the season, excuse me, and through a series. I think you can go 6 or 7, but I do agree if Milwaukee wins game 2, the Celtics are going to be in a little bit of trouble. But you even took the words out of my mouth in answering the question on whether Giannis Antetokounmpo is the best player in the NBA. You say he is. I definitely have him in the top 3. Right now, he's the best player left in the playoffs by far. Not the best shooter, improving shooter, but watch out. Watch out for the rest of the Eastern Conference and whoever comes out of the West if the Bucks continue to advance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think this Bucks team has proven. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really take them that serious. Even when they won the title, the Suns. I was that fan that was like, well, if the Lakers would have beat the Suns in round one, then they would have played the Bucks, and whatever. I was that fan at that point. Well, looking at the Bucks now, they are in attack mode. They are in defend mode. They are actually visibly defending their title every time they've stepped out on the court. Because even though they handled the Chicago Bulls in round one, it wasn't a give. It wasn't just a gimme. They needed to be on their best, playing. They needed to play their best. And obviously the Chicago Bulls were missing some pieces and struggled against teams that were the real deal, I would say. They could handle the lower, 6 and under teams, but those top 5 they had some struggles with throughout the season. Anyone below them they could handle pretty easily. Anyone above them was a little bit of a different story, especially towards the end of the season. But I mean, this Bucks team really proved that they are a team that is going to go back if they can, and they're going to give it everything they got. And I see them handling business with the Celtics. The Celtics don't really, to me, seem like they can answer Giannis, even when he's not scoring. Everything else Giannis does, I don't see a lot of players on the Celtics team that can contain Giannis. I also don't see a lot of players that can keep up with some of the other role players on this Bucks team. So Celtics are obviously a skilled team, but like I said, you're going up against the real team, not the fake team. So if they drop game 2, if the Celtics lose game 2, I fully believe it's a 4 or 5 game series. If the Celtics can bounce back and win game 2, I can see it shifting a little bit and becoming maybe a 6 game series. I still see the Bucks coming out on top, but I mean, this Celtics team is really skilled. From where they were at the beginning to middle of the season to where they are now, just shows they're the real deal as well. The only thing is, I don't think that they'll be able to make it all the way to the top. Um, Maybe they make it past the Bucks, but I just think this Bucks team is showing that they're the real deal, and they're gonna fully intending on going back to the finals and defending their title for sure, getting
Yeah.
Giannis' second one.
I want to make it known that Montana referenced my beloved Chicago Bulls before I did in the podcast. I think it was the 220 mark. So just so everybody knows. No, look, I think the Bucks made a statement with the Bulls. The first couple games in that series were competitive, but after that, it was all Milwaukee. And they made a statement of the rest of the Eastern Conference and the rest of the league, even and especially without Chris Middleton. And I think they're continuing to do that here with the Celtics. I think it'll be a good series. I think you know, uh, I haven't found anybody that's able to single-handedly stop Giannis Antetokounmpo yet. So it's gonna, that stopping that man is going to be a team effort. But one thing to watch out for going forward is Defensive Player of the Year Marcus Smart is nursing a couple of injuries. You saw it there yesterday. On the exercise bike, having the ice packs, heat packs all over his body, looked like a prize fighter trying to battle out there. So one thing to keep an eye on, and the Bucks, don't forget, are coached by Mike Budenholzer. Um, Decent coach, not always one that makes all the adjustments necessary. So if the Bucks get a big lead, usually they'll let teams back in. That's not a slight on Budenholzer. Well, maybe it kind of is, but um, you know, anything can happen. So, but I think going forward, it will be an exciting series. Another exciting series that started yesterday was that of the Golden State Warriors and the Memphis Grizzlies. They played a pretty close game, even though the Warriors were winning for the majority of the game. 117-116 victory by Golden State yesterday. Ja Morant had a chance to win it with a lefty layup that was a little too strong, but the Warriors escaped. So road teams holding serve so far in the conference semifinals. But the main story after the game was the ejection of Warriors forward Draymond Green on a questionable, in my opinion, flagrant 2 foul call on Brandon Clark that earned him a quick trip to the showers. So I'm not even going to ask you if the NBA is getting soft, Montana. My question to you is, how soft has the NBA gotten with that foul on Draymond Green?
Well, so the NBA is getting so soft that they look at. Personally, I never thought it was a foul in the first place. Definitely not a flagrant. The second part of that foul, because when they went through what happened and they talked about the foul was, there was like there's two different parts. The second part, Draymond Green was simply trying to help someone up, and the way it looked, personally to me, I never saw him push. I never saw. I obviously there was contact. Definitely not flagrant contact, and even questionable actual like foul contact in my opinion. He hopped right into his hotel room and hopped on his podcast right after and talked about it and was claiming that he was trying to help. He didn't mean to get in that position and he was trying to help him up, and then that was apparently looked at as a flagrant foul. Contact that may have called for just a regular foul, but definitely not a flagrant. Um, he also went into talking about how usually this is the time of year when you can be a little bit more aggressive. And now we're seeing this time of year when it's like the whole season, everyone's walking on eggshells with these refs nowadays. Well, now the whole season, you look forward to the postseason, you can be a little more aggressive, put a little more into it. And now look, it's one of the softest calls I think we've ever seen in the playoffs. I think that it is a super soft call. And when they went out, when I watched it multiple times today, tuned into Undisputed with Skip and Shannon. I don't usually do that, but I saw a clip of them on social media the other day yelling at each other, and I was like, I think it's time to give it a watch again. So tuned into that, and they both agreed that it was not. It was not a flagrant. Skip did say that he could see it being just a regular foul, and I can see the first half of that being that, but I don't know. I just feel like that was a really soft call, and especially when he tried to help him up and all that, whatever. I guess he could have been looked at the wrong way, but to me, it looked like he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and then he tried to correct it, and then it just looked some type of way. But then he kind of danced off and was doing his whole thing and like kind of made a scene afterwards. But I mean, again, I get these players being frustrated because usually, like I said, the NBA playoffs are when you can bring a little more aggression, and we've seen them not call certain things they might have called during the regular season. They just let the games go on. Well, this now we can't even do that here. So basketball, the NBA is getting extremely soft, and luckily the Warriors still pulled that win off. I'm not shocked that they did. Even Warriors really stepped up and played really well against that Grizzlies team.
Sure.
But very soft call, and Draymond made really good points. I watched his little segment on the show about that whole thing right after that. I'm sure the NBA is not going to be happy about that either. But yeah, I definitely think it was really soft, and now we're getting to a point where we can't even show aggression and push certain things in the playoffs. So it's not a great look for the NBA at all.
I think there's a call on line one to Draymond Green from the NBA's offices in New York. I think there's a $25,000 to $50,000 fine in
Yeah.
Draymond Green's future. Look, I didn't think it was a flagrant 2. I think it looked worse than what it was. I understand what the NBA is trying to do with these flagrant fouls. I just think they're going a little overboard. If you watch some of the games, and old heads would tell you this, um, if you watch some of the games from the 80s and 90s, that would maybe not even been called a foul in the 80s and 90s, especially mid 90s. Here you got a flagrant 2 and leading to a player being ejected. Now, Draymond Green does have a little bit of a reputation, right? He's always been involved in some questionable calls. Let's even go back to I think it was the 2016 NBA Finals where, that kick to LeBron James's groin got him suspended, and helped Cleveland come back from 3-1 to beat the Warriors, but that's a different story for a different time. Give the Warriors credit, first of all. They lost one of their top players, and they still were able to eke out a playoff win on the road against a tough opponent. But going back to the Charmin soft toilet paper issue, I mean the NBA, that was terrible. Throwing out one of your better players. Draymond was actually interviewed by the Inside the NBA guys earlier tonight before the Miami Philly game, and he was saying he didn't even foul him. He had his hands up. I have to go back and watch the video again to verify this, but and again, this is just a player defending himself, but he had his hand up, and he claims that Brandon Clark jumped into him, and the jersey caught him and just made the fall look worse than what it was. Unfortunately, that's not the only questionable, we'll say, flagrant call that's been, handed out over the last couple of years. And unfortunately, some of these calls have altered games. They've altered series, things of that nature. I get that the NBA is trying to de-escalate things and not have fights started. I understand that they're trying to protect players and make sure that players aren't unnecessarily getting injured. But this is the freaking NBA playoffs, man. Every other sport, with the exception of baseball, although that's a different type of intensity there too, there's increased physicality because these are the best teams playing for the championship. You can't just give someone an eye pass to the championship round here. In hockey, it's very noticeable that the physicality increases. Football as well. Sometimes the refs swallow their whistle depending on who the officiating crew is. Same in the NBA, but it's just gotten ridiculous. And yes, as fans, most fans want to see more of an offensive game in the NBA. Yes, we want to see our players protected and the stars playing instead of being hurt on the sidelines. But you cannot prevent every single injury. You can try to prevent some fighting, but there's going to be intensity. These guys are playing for championships, especially guys that don't have rings yet. It's going to be heated. Playoff crowds are the best in my opinion. It's the best time of year. So emotions are going to be running high. I mean, you mentioned Draymond Green skipping off after he got ejected. It's probably because he didn't want to throw a fit and get himself in more trouble and possibly suspended for game 2 or even more. But the NBA's got to really do something. I don't know if they have a competition committee like they do in the NFL, but they really got to take a look at how these flagrant foul calls are being officiated, because there's a lot of questionable calls, including flagrant ones that, hell, in a pickup game, we probably wouldn't even call it, let alone an NBA game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting a little bit ridiculous. And another thing you have to realize is the numbers for the playoffs have consistently dropped as of recent years. Well, when you're putting your best players and you're suspending them and they're out for a game or more, in certain players' cases throughout the last few years, if a person's tuning in to see their team and one of the pivotal players play, they're not even playing. Some people won't want to tune into that game anymore. So you're taking away a little bit of your revenue too if you're sitting and getting these guys out of these series that people want to watch play. So it's hurting them too at the end of the day. It's hurting everybody involved.
Well, hopefully, the NBA will look into that, and if for the Phoenix Suns' sake, hopefully Scott Foster doesn't officiate any more of their games, because Chris Paul hasn't won a single game Scott Foster has officiated. I'm sure if he does, and the Suns are up, there's going to be some sort of flagrant foul call that Scott Foster himself calls, but neither here nor there. Well, from the softness of the NBA to a game that is anything but soft. Yes, that's right. We're going to hit it up a little early today, ladies and gentlemen. One of the more popular growing games on YouTube and Spotify, we are going with our next edition of NBA Player Or. 2 weeks ago, Montana went 5 for 5 for the first time. Broke his streak last week and missing a question, but still finished with a 3 for 5 effort. He's now, for those of you counting at home, 15 of 20 in NBA Player Or. That's a 750 batting average for you math majors out there. So let's see how he will do this week. And I'll be honest, Montana, I'm not very confident that I'm going to stump you this week.
Okay.
The topic for this week is NBA Player or NFL Draft Pick.
All right.
And the reason why, and I didn't think this one through, it's solely 2022 NFL draft picks. I could have made this super difficult and said anybody that ever got drafted by the NFL. but I don't have that much time on my hands. Anyway,
All right.
for those that have been watching us here over the last 5 weeks and into week 6, you know how the game is played. But for those that are new to the Well Beyond the Arc podcast, I give Montana 5 names, and he has to determine whether or not they are an NBA player or someone from another profession. And we change that, or if you will, every week. If Montana gets a player correct or a name correct, you will hear this sound.
Victory!
Thank you once again, Johnny Drama. If Montana gets one incorrect, we'll hear this sound. Pretty straightforward. All right, Montana, you ready to go?
I'm ready. Let's get into it.
All right, let's see how you do. The first name, is this an NBA player or 2022 NFL draft pick? The name is James Mitchell. James Mitchell.
All right. I'm going to go with NFL draft.
Victory!
Well done, sir. James Mitchell hails from Virginia Tech. He is a tight end drafted number 177th overall to the Detroit Lions. Well done, sir. You are 1 for 1. Let's go to our second name. Is this an NBA player or NFL draft pick? The name is Curtis Perry. Curtis Perry.
I'm going to stick with NFL draft pick.
Oh, Curtis Perry played in the NBA from 1971 to 1978 for the Rockets, Bucks, and Suns, averaging 9.5 points per game in 480 career games.
There goes the streak.
And the streak is over at 1. All right. Name number 3. Is this an NBA player or NFL draft pick? The name is Danny Gray. Danny Gray. And again, this is the 2022 NFL draft only.
I heard the first thing I heard was Danny, so I was hoping it was going to be Danny Green. You know, the brick master himself. But I'm going to go with NFL draft.
Oh.
Victory!
Well, I don't know if Danny Gray has a nickname, but I'm sure it's not the Brickmaster himself. Danny Gray, wide receiver out of SMU, drafted 105th overall to the San Francisco 49ers. Back on track, Montana. All right, 2 out of 3. Let's go to name number 4. Is this an NBA player or NFL draft pick? The name is David Rivers. David Rivers.
I'm going to stick on the side of NFL draft pick.
Oh no, David Rivers, former guard, played in the NBA from 1988 to 1988 to 1992. Split time with the Los Angeles Lakers and LA Clippers. Had 3.4 points per game in 114 games. He also played for Olympiacos of the Greek League and played against Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls in the 1997 McDonald's Open. Also on that team is current Bulls general manager Arturas Karnisovas. All right, 2 for 2. Let's see if we can get 3 out of 5, Montana. The fifth and final name, Rodney Monroe. Is Rodney Monroe an NBA player or NFL draft pick?
Well, I'm not even sure if I've said NFL or NBA player yet. So I'm gonna switch it up and I'm gonna go to the other side and say NBA player.
Victory!
All right, still got a winning record here, ladies and gentlemen. In each of the 5 weeks of NBA player or Rodney Moore played 38 games in the NBA with the Atlanta Hawks in the 1991-92 season, averaged 3.4 points per game. I swear I'm not doing a search on a live sports bureau for players that average 3.4 points per game during their career. It just happens to be that way. All right. Well, Montana, you're still with a winning record. You're 3 out of 5. That brings your running total to 18 of 25. Still a plus 700 batting average, 72 to be percent to be exact. And yeah, better luck next week for a 5 for 5. But once again, well done, sir. All right. Well, then we move on to a couple series that are getting underway tonight. Game in action right now is the Philadelphia 76ers visiting the Miami Heat in game 1 of their Eastern Conference semifinal series. Big story coming into that series is Sixers center and MVP finalist Joel Embiid suffering an injury in game 6 of the series with the 76ers series with the Toronto Raptors. And unfortunately, it seems like Joel Embiid is going to be out until at least game 3 or 4 of this series. But the controversy here, when Joel Embiid got injured, the 76ers were up 20 plus points with a few minutes left in the fourth quarter. Questionable decision by Doc Rivers, to say the least. So my simple question to you, Montana, is Doc Rivers really a good NBA coach? Or is this just a one-off bonehead move?
Well, he's a good NBA coach. He tends to piece together teams, which I know front office has a big say in who's going where. Obviously, the coach is still in the conversation, but he has time and time again pieced together players that can't get it done when it matters. For example, James Harden. Tonight, he only scored 16 points, 5 assists. He did have 9 rebounds in 35 minutes. The problem isn't the 9 or the 5, it's the 16. Your best player is out. When your best player is out, the sidekick, if you will, because let's be honest, if we're going to call them a dynamic duo, which I'm not even going to call them that, but if we're going to call them that, James Harden is the sidekick. He's not the leading guy, but you still expect that sidekick player to show up. Well, he's never really done that. He's never really shown up when it matters. He'll put up big points in a game that is pretty forgettable. Maybe 2018 Rockets versus the Hawks or something like that. Some forgettable game against a team that doesn't have a chance. Doc Rivers pieces these players together. A stat that just shows that Doc Rivers can't get it done in the playoffs. He has blown 3-1 leads in the postseason. 3. That's about all I have to say about that, because when you're blowing 3-1 leads with pretty star-studded teams all those teams have had really solid players. I will say that 3-1 lead when he coached for the Magic and they were playing the Pistons, that was a little bit different. But the other 2 3-1 leads, arguably his teams were more stacked. His teams were projected to win. And when you're up 3-1, that's that closeout game. That's that go for the kill game. And he is not good at that. So Doc Rivers, obviously NBA champion coach, has had a lot of success record-wise, a lot of playoff teams, but he can't get it done when it matters. And he gets these players that absolutely can't get it done when it matters. For example, James Harden. So no, I don't think he's a bad coach. I just think he gets in a lot of bad situations that will probably tarnish his career and what people look at him as. Because blowing a 3-1 lead, which frankly I don't think they're going to go up, I don't think the 76ers will control this series at all. If they get Embiid back, that might shift it. But I mean, when your guy is putting up 16 points, you know what I mean? When Tobias Harris is outscoring James Harden, you've got a problem. No trash against Harris, but Harden is supposed to be that guy. So Doc Rivers, not a bad coach, has been in a lot of bad situations and usually doesn't have the correct team to get it done when it matters.
Yeah, I think the decision to leave Joel Embiid in longer than probably what he should have been in against the Raptors is going to come back to haunt Doc Rivers. I think it was a tremendous mistake. You're up 20 plus points with I don't know I don't remember what time it was that was left. I think it was under 5 minutes to go. Joel Embiid should have been on the bench, and they should have been putting in the reserves and getting rest and moving on to Miami and having a healthy Joel Embiid for game 1. and it would have been a hell of a series between Miami and the Philadelphia 76ers. It would have been we should have been talking about how the Miami Heat, probably the best, arguably the best defensive team in the NBA, is going to come up with a plan uh, to stop Joel Embiid and some of those other guys. But now you're talking about James Harden, who everybody forgets he's about 33 years old, maybe not in the best shape. Maybe he's not. Been struggling ever since he got traded to Philly. Granted, I think James Harden is a better option than Ben Simmons, who, oh, by the way, is playing and hasn't in a year. This podcast isn't about Ben Simmons. Look, I think Doc Rivers is a fairly good coach. He's definitely not a great coach. And he was named to the NBA's top coaches list for the NBA's 75th anniversary, which I disagreed with. I think there are other better coaches than Doc Rivers. Yes, he's got a championship, but there's been a lot of NBA coaches that have won a championship. Paul Westhead won an NBA championship with the Lakers in 1980, but I didn't see his name up there. Mike Budenholzer has one championship. I didn't see his name up there. So I don't think that's necessarily the prerequisite to being one of the top coaches. Yes, Doc Rivers has been coaching for a long time. It hasn't been all bad for Doc Rivers. I will give him that. When he took the job in Orlando, no one expected the Orlando Magic to do anything. And granted, they had Tracy McGrady. Grant Hill was injured. They didn't get Tim Duncan, but he did more than what was expected initially with Orlando. So I'll give him that much credit. I think he's a good motivator of men. I think he's a good leader. He's a good communicator. He is one of the best coaches in the NBA at ATOs, after timeout plays. But everything you mentioned about not coming up big in big playoff games and the situations you talked about, he's had opportunities to win Boston. He did get the 2000 NBA championship, but a lot of that has been credited to the Celtics, then big three of Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen, and rightfully so. Did get a second finals appearance with that squad in 2010, even though a lot of those guys were a lot older. Went to, I believe, 7 games, and they lost to Kobe Bryant, the Lakers there, a game that they very well could have won. Since then, Doc Rivers has not been to the NBA Finals. He inherited some great Clippers teams that have put together some improved rosters. I mean, he helped make the Clippers relevant again. I'll give him that much credit. And that Clippers team should have went farther than what it did, at least 2 of those seasons, especially before the Warriors got good, and they didn't do it. Now, when asked about some of the playoff struggles, Doc Rivers was kind of taken aback, and this is in the Raptors series of blowing 3-1 leads, and he pleaded saying, well, yes, I've blown 3-1 leads, but you haven't told the whole story. Well, that's just making excuses. Yes, he had an injured Chris Paul and Blake Griffin with the Clippers. There's been a couple instances where he's injuries have played a part, but that's part of the game. It's the playoffs. If you're a good coach, yeah, you need good players, but you should be able to come up with some sort of scheme to get one game. You have 3 chances to win. You got to get one game out of that, and he hasn't been able to do that. So Doc Rivers, good coach, not great coach, but I think the decision to leave Embiid in is going to come back and haunt him, because it very well might have cost the Philadelphia 76ers their season.
Yeah, and I think it may have. Going back to what you said about when they, obviously beat the Lakers one time when he was coaching the Celtics, and then lost that second one. I was really hoping to see a third finals series, kind of the trilogy, but never happened, never solidified. Bunch of players went a bunch of different places, and kind of those teams kind of disintegrated. Honestly, they kind of fell apart, and a lot of those players were moved other places. But in the game, and I just recently watched Game 7 a few weeks ago of that Lakers versus Celtics game, you can see the Celtics had control of the game early on. Kobe could not have been bricking more shots. Kobe was bricking almost everything in the first half.
And playing hurt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And he was pretty well covered. I think that Doc, and obviously I can't speak on how it is to be on that sideline, with all those fans, and like you're right there. I don't know, but I feel like he is a coach that lets his emotions and his ego play too much into decisions. He wanted to keep Joel Embiid on that court to bury the Raptors because they almost came back because of all that talk of the 3-1 lead. He let his emotions get in the way, and he was like, Well, let me show you what we're going to do to you. We're going to beat you the whole game, all the way through, as much as we can. Well, look what's happening now. You may have just found yourself a second round exit with this.
Yep.
And even
Yep.
if Joel Embiid comes back, there's no guarantee. He's going to come back all the way. Obviously, I feel like he probably will. The injury he has, I feel like he will recover well if he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. But B, even if he comes back and he's fully healthy, if this Heat team is on a roll, they're not going to go down. They're not going to fold even when the best player for the 76ers comes back. So I think that Doc Rivers' career has been a little tarnished by some egotistical moves and also by some emotional moves. I listened to a podcast on him. I'm not sure if any of our listeners are familiar with All the Smoke. I love that podcast. One of my favorite.
Matty Barnes and Steven Jackson. Yes, sir.
Legendaries. They have so many great guests, so many great conversations. He went on. Oh, it's been a while. I think it was around. It was right after the bubble, I believe, or it was right before that. It's been a little while, but hearing him talk, he knows the sport of basketball. He loves the sport of basketball. He has been fully encircled in the sport of basketball for so long as a player and now as a coach. He loves the sport. He knows the sport. But even just hearing him talk about certain things, you can tell that he is very emotional and he lets certain things come into play. Obviously, that's again, I'm not on that sideline. So you can't, I'm not there. I'm not a coach in the NBA or any professional league. So I don't know. It's probably pretty easy to let your emotions get the best of you. But I think a mix of that and his ego has really, really, really hurt him in several series and in several situations. And we're seeing it again here. And potentially this is the worst. Not a 3-1 lead, but you were up by 15 to 20 plus points, lost your best player, and now you're relying on James Harden and his 16 points, which frankly, I don't care what shape he is or how old he is. That is ridiculous for James Harden, who is very much looked at as one of the best scorers in NBA history.
At least what? Well, yeah, in NBA history, yes, I agree. I think his career is on the downside. I think he's running into what we see with Carmelo Anthony, what we saw with Carmelo Anthony. Getting up to like a scoring lead, then starting to drop off with age. Father Time is undefeated. I mean, the only one that's defeating it so far, two people that I can think of, and Tom Brady and LeBron James, but that's a different story for another day. The good news for the 76ers is that they do expect Joel Embiid back at some point in the series, maybe game 3 or 4. Hopefully for them, game 3, because if it goes to a game 4, it might be too late. And if the Heat are up 3-0, I don't even bring Joel Embiid back at that point.
No.
Joel Embiid does get a chance to rest that bum thumb, the torn ligament in his thumb, but now he's got two other, he's got that concussion, the mild concussion and the orbital bone fracture that, he's probably going to be wearing that mask, and he's probably going to be thinking about that, at least if in the first quarter, the first game he plays in. But look, James Harden is still a threat. No matter how much we rip him or not, he is still a threat out there. Tobias Harris can give you 20 points. Tyrese Maxey, much improved player, basically doubled the scoring average. Their new de facto point guard can put the ball on the floor and get you some points. So I don't think the 76ers are completely screwed, but they are in trouble. Hopefully for them, Joel Embiid can come back, make this a series. And again, Miami's missing Kyle Lowry too, but Miami is so deep. Also have a hurting Jimmy Butler, but I think he was playing tonight. I didn't check the box score, but I think I'd have Miami winning the series anyway. But Joel Embiid missing at least 2 games, maybe 3, definitely puts Miami in the driver's seat. So we'll see how that goes. Well, folks, we will pause here for just a second for a word from the Yankee and the Brit.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Jay from Yankee and the Brit telling you to come over and check out our shows. The Yankee and the Brit Sports Talk, Well Beyond the Arc, the Markout Podcast, Flagrant and Foul, Real Talk with Jay, and MMA Underground Weekly live every Wednesday at 5 Eastern at YouTube/The Yankee and the Brit. Deuces.
All right, be sure to check out those podcasts on the Yankee and the Brit, sports group. Well, the only conference semifinal matchup we haven't talked about yet is that of the Dallas Mavericks and the Phoenix Suns. The Dallas Mavericks surprised me personally by making not necessarily quick work, but defeating the Utah Jazz in their series. And the Phoenix Suns, despite missing Devin Booker for a couple of games, they were able to hold off the upstart New Orleans Pelicans in a great game, in a great closing game in New Orleans last week, with Chris Paul going 14 for 14 from the field. The Suns getting Devin Booker back, giving them a boost. But now it gets to the road gets more difficult for both teams. Montana, how do you see this series going, and how have the Mavericks been able to be so good and getting this far?
So, the series I think is going to go one of two ways. One, it's a all-out battle all through, and it goes to 6 or 7. That is, in my opinion, a little less likely with Mr. Devin Booker back. With Devin Booker back, I see the Suns making pretty easy work of the Mavs in 4 or 5 games. As we are recording this right now, the Suns are up 18-6 in Game 1. Obviously, games can flip-flop pretty quickly for either team. We could see the Mavs go on a run, and the Mavs are a team that have gone on several runs throughout games. So an 18-6 lead in the first is nothing crazy. That's not going to show how the whole series is going to go. But when you have the arguably one of the best players in the NBA right now in Devin Booker, and another one of the best players in the NBA in Chris Paul, and you could even say Ayton. You could throw all 3 of those guys in the top 20, 30 players. I don't know if I would put them all in that list, especially maybe not Ayton, but they're all up there. They're all some of the best of the best. And now Booker's back, and he's making pretty easy work right now. I think when I checked, he has 6 points just in the first. Not bad for coming back off an injury. So I think that this Suns team, if they dominate tonight's game, as we're recording, and they win by a sizable amount, I'm going to say 15 or more, I think that the Suns are going to handle business pretty swiftly. Even if they win, but it's a close game, I think it'll be a battle. But this Suns team, I do think outmatches the Mavs in a couple of areas. And we're seeing it tonight with how the game has started. But the Mavs are definitely a talented team, and they are building. We saw them kind of fall off once Dirk was on the way out. It was kind of the Dirk Nowitzki show. We're just, he's going to put up some onyx shots. I remember his last season, I went to a game in Dallas when they played the Nets, and they lost to a pretty bad Nets team because that was, I think, 2015, 2016. So the Nets were nothing at that point. So I don't want to say nothing. Obviously, they were an NBA team with skilled, talented players, but they were not a team that we were looking at as an elite team, not top of the pack. Kept on feeding Dirk the ball. Everyone was going crazy every time Dirk got the ball. Whenever Dirk didn't have the ball, quiet, silent. No one cared. Feed Dirk the ball, put up some of your iconic shots. Even if you only score 12, you saw 12 points from one of the greatest players of all time. That was the vibe in Dallas. It was, let's celebrate Dirk, and then kind of not a complete rebuild, but a lot of rebuilding went on. Luckily, they had Luka. Luka kind of came in and made the transition easier. And since then, Luka has led that team into battle. It does not matter who they are playing. He leads them into battle every time. He is their fearless leader. Personally, I think he will end up being the face of the NBA at some point. That's a pretty big statement with all the talent, especially young talent. But he is huge. He is bigger than life. He has been playing professional ball since around the time I was learning how to drive. Okay, he was 16, I believe. He was high school age when he was playing up against a lot of professionals. So he's the real deal, and this Mavs team is kind of building and forming around him. I think this offseason they'll make some sizable changes to bring some more consistency around him. Personally, Kristaps Porzingis wasn't a consistent player to put around him. I think they tried that, experiment. It was semi-successful, but it was really only successful because of what Luka was doing. It wasn't really Kristaps. It was Luka carrying the load. Sometimes Kristaps will play and put up some points and maybe have a clutch shot, but usually he'd be out with injuries or just bricking a lot of shots. So personally, I think this Mavs team is special, and I think that they're going to make some changes to put them up in that level with the Suns. I don't think they're quite there this season, but I still can see it being a close series because, like I said, when you have a player like Luka, you never know what's going to happen. So either Suns kill them in game one, and they say we've got this series, we're gonna be in the driver's seat the whole time, or it's a close battle that kind of shows us how the rest of the series is going to go. As of now, I think it could go either way, but I definitely have this Suns team coming out on top, regardless of how close the series is.
Yeah. Last week, I ended our podcast episode by pleading to the New Orleans Pelicans and the Brooklyn Nets to sign me. I'll play more than Ben Simmons and Zion Williamson. If Kristaps Porzingis was still on the Mavericks, I'd be reaching out to Mark Cuban and offering my services to stand out 30 feet from the basket and shoot pointless threes like Kristaps Porzingis and brick them. And I would cost a lot less than $33 million. But thankfully for Mark Cuban and the Mavericks, they were able to make a deal, ship Porzingis out, who I still think has some potential in being a pretty good NBA player and has shown so with the Washington Wizards. But, he's sitting at home watching the Suns Mavericks series. And I think, in my opinion, I think the Suns are going to win this in 6. The biggest key for the Suns is going to be their health. If Chris Paul and Devin Booker have to stay healthy, more so Chris Paul, because I think the Suns showed that they can at least hold the fort down without Booker, but you need Devin Booker to keep moving forward. Their opponents are just going to get harder, more and more difficult to face, and it's hard to replace 27 points per game scoring a guy that can score off the dribble and a sweet shooter like Devin Booker. Um, you know, DeAndre Ayton, we're going to see how he's being used and how the Mavericks look to exploit him because, most of the Mavericks big men are guys that are stretch 4s and 5s, with the exception of one of my favorite players in the NBA, Boban Marjanovic, who hopefully will see some burn this series, and he'll see more burn on the floor than he does in his State Farm commercials, which I do enjoy. But look, how are the Mavericks so good? 2 words: Luka Doncic. He's leading their team and once again in scoring, rebounding, and assists. He might even be leading them in steals. But the dude is a stud. He is. I agree. He will be, if not the face of the NBA at some point. He's got that a modern Larry Bird-esque game where he plays so slow, but he's effective. He can shoot. He can do everything on the court. Yeah, reminds me of a modern day Larry Bird, just with better handles, and not as accurate as a shot. But what the Mavericks did, we mentioned Kristaps Porzingis being traded, but what they've done is they've been able to develop Jalen Brunson, who has had a coming out party this year. He's got to be. I didn't see what the voting was for most improved player of the year, but he's got to be in top 10 in that voting. And he's had a couple of 30-point playoff games, especially one with Luka Doncic out. Jalen Brunson can play, despite being a late round, first round draft pick. That dude can play. Just gives the Mavericks another weapon on the court. They missed Tim Hardaway Jr., who's a 3-and-D guy, great outside shooter, but they have been able to acquire Spencer Dinwiddie, making that team a little bit more deep. A guard they can put on the floor, take it to the bucket, shoot from the outside. Dorian Finney-Smith, every time I watch a Mavericks game, all I see him do is defend and shoot threes. Not that he's the greatest shooter, but he's improved. So similar to Milwaukee, Dallas has been able to surround Luka with guys that can shoot from the outside. Maxi Kleber being another one as well. Davis Bertans, who they got back in the Porzingis trade, another guy. And letting Luka basically be up to him on whether or not, after a screen roll, he takes it to the bucket, kicks it out for a pick and pop roll with one of those other 4 guys to shoot a 3. I would call them almost the baby Celtics. Not as talented, not as effective, not as good defensively, but they've improved defensively. And not having Kristaps Porzingis there just gives the Mavericks opponents some more matchup problems and things of that nature. But despite all that, if the Suns can stay healthy, I have them winning this in 6. Very surprised by the coaching of Jason Kidd. He's actually, I think he's done a pretty good job with this Mavericks group. Not just being a 500 coach, but leading them to a higher seed, and we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. No, I think it's going to go one. I think it could go either way. I obviously have the Suns win it regardless, but if the Suns blow the Mavs out of the water, even with Luka, I don't see it being more than a 4 or 5 game series. If it's a close game tonight and it goes down to the wire, which it very well could, again, we've seen games shift very quickly. Within 5 to 10 minutes, a game can shift the other side completely as long as it's close enough for a shift. Currently, the game was already shifted as we're still recording. It's 33-25 at the end of the first. So it's already shifting in the way that I think it's going to be a competitive series. If the Suns can pull away and just dominate tonight, I think it'll be more difficult for the Mavs to come back. But you never know. Again, Luka is great, and he's surrounded by a pretty good cast. And I think that they're going to fill a couple of holes and make a few slight changes this summer. But at the same time, this group of guys has really worked around Luka. You got rid of one that really wasn't, and now you're kind of adding on and growing. So the future for Dallas is bright.
Oh
The
yeah.
future may be now. We may see them pull this series off. I don't see that happening, but the NBA playoffs, anything can happen. Like we've said, anything can happen. It can be game to game. One game, one team's in control. The next game, the other team is. So I think this will
Sure.
be a fun series. But I think we're both on the same page. I think the Suns handle business pretty swiftly, whether it's in 5 games, 6 games, whatever. I think they're going to handle business.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that series go. I'll be watching uh, Suns defenders, primarily Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder, and the job that they'll have to be doing against NBA All-Star Luka Doncic. So it should be a fun series, and all 4 of the conference semifinal series are going to be fun to watch and pretty interesting going forward. So
Absolutely.
one player that is not playing in the conference semifinals, and quite frankly hasn't played much since he entered the league in 2019, is former Duke forward, former number 1 overall pick, and Curry Williamson. He came out recently, last couple of days, when asked if whether or not he'd be interested in signing an extension in New Orleans, 5-year extension, if he was offered. He said, "Yeah, I would sign it immediately." Montana, Zion Williamson, like Ben Simmons, is a head scratcher to me. He even went on to say that he was cleared to play and he was ready to play, but he didn't want to risk it, which to me that was a no-no. I don't know who in the Pelicans PR department told him that was a good idea, or if he went off script out with that. But what do you make of Zion Williamson's comments on that? If he was offered a contract extension by the Pelicans, he'd sign it yesterday.
So this is my answer to that. Ask Zion the same question back in January. He's not going to say that. He's not. He saw how successful this group is, and he's like, well, I want a piece of that too. He knows that the Pelicans are probably going to pay him the most, even though he has not made the fans too happy. I don't know if you saw this. This was a couple months ago. During Mardi Gras, there was a float of him that was really unflattering, that showed him incredibly large and very fat, and was like just not the most flattering thing that you probably want your fan base to have of you. So this was back during the celebration of Mardi Gras in New Orleans. So fans are not probably loving him at the moment, because when you drafted him, you expected him to be the future of your franchise.
Sure.
He was supposed to get the keys, and he was supposed to get the keys early on. I remember people were like, oh, LeBron James 2.0. I was like, first of all, no, definitely not. Even when he was in college, before he was drafted, I was like, he's not going to be a LeBron James. There will never be another LeBron James. Not saying there won't be players that are better, but his path and who he is and how long he has been it, there's never going to be another LeBron. That's another talk for another time. But he was really overhyped. Now, when he made his debut, he had a pretty good debut. He had a really solid game. He jacked up a lot of threes. They weren't the prettiest threes, but he was making them. So he had a pretty good start, and it was exciting. But the entire time, the second he stepped on the court, I remember I was watching with one of my friends his debut game. I was like, this guy's gonna have some injury problems. This guy's going to be a talented player, but he is going to have a lot of injury problems, specifically with what he is doing at his weight, how high he is jumping, coming down like he is. He is dominating, but he is also hurting himself each time he does one of those crazy dunks or one of those things. I don't truly think he would have said the same thing he said now if you asked him this in January. I don't doubt that he was injured. Seeing how he got injured and also knowing his history with injuries and the whole time he's been in the NBA pretty much, I don't doubt he was injured. But I don't think he would have said, yeah, I'll sign this. I want to sign it now. I can't sign it fast enough. He wouldn't have said that back in January. He has seen what this team is becoming and he wants a piece of it. And like I said before, I think this is arguably the team that's probably going to pay him the most. I just think that at this point, this team is going to go in fully with him still, even with the backlash and the fan base being not happy and that one pretty funny but definitely unflattering float. I don't think he's going to get the same amount of money or the same amount of I still think he has the keys. I still think this team is maybe stupidly saying he's our guy still. I think Brandon Ingram's the guy. By far he's proved that. But I think he's still looked at as the guy because of how much they went in on him and all the hype that's built up around him. And obviously very physically, athletically gifted. There's no doubt there at all. He is one of the most athletically gifted players at his age in the NBA by far, even with his injuries. In regards to his comments about the game and coming back, that is almost worse than Ben Simmons. You're telling me that you were cleared 100% and you just decided not to play. Now, Ben Simmons is a similar situation, but the difference is he didn't say anything about it. He's staying quiet like he has his entire time that he's been injured. So Zion made a mistake by making that comment. That may cause some backlash, and I've already seen it cause some backlash from the fans because they're like, he said like, "Oh, I was going to come back in Game 7." Well, Game 6, you have to have a Game 6 to have a Game 7. Why wouldn't you come back in the game that defined whether you were going home or playing another game? Why would you say, "Oh, I'll come back"? But so yeah, I think I would like to see him back on the court. Personally, I do enjoy watching him play. I like watching him play for Duke. The few games he's played in the NBA, he's been explosive and fun to watch. I don't think he's what he could be. I think he needs to make some changes if he wants to get to where he could be. But this Pelicans team with Zion could very well be a scary, scary team. If it works, if everything comes to fruition, I think it could be a fun team to watch. But I also think this Pelicans team needs to be careful because of, the fact that A, he's very injury prone. B, he could have came back and he didn't, and he's dumb enough to go out and say it. I'm not going to say dumb enough, but a little bit. I mean, you didn't have to make that statement. Ben Simmons sure didn't say anything at all, except for the fact that, oh, I could have came back, or I wanted to, and then I couldn't because whatever. But that was like through the grapevine. He didn't directly say that. He didn't say anything. This was from Zion personally. We know he said this. So
Yeah.
I think the Pelicans should be careful, but I don't think they should completely turn away from him because I do think he could help them in the near and distant future potentially.
You mentioned the unflattering float. My question is, was it a float or was he the float? Because he's had some weight fluctuations, and there's been some different pictures going around of Zion. Look, it's disappointing to hear him say that he was healthy enough to go, but didn't out of a caution. I get that he wants to prolong his career. I get that. I'm gonna chalk his comments up as to young age. Everybody forgets the kid's only 21 years old. I mean, I said a lot of stupid things at 21. You're 21. I'm sure you've said some stupid things in the last, ever since you've turned 21. So that one I'm going to chalk up to young age. He hasn't shown a pattern of quitting on his team or doing some head scratching things the way that Ben Simmons has. Now Ben Simmons still a relatively young man, but he's had a history of quitting on teams. I'm not saying Zion completely quit, but definitely a head scratcher, right? So 21 years old. I'll give you some numbers here. The debut that he had that you mentioned, he was against the San Antonio Spurs. Only had 4 points in the first half, but then out of nowhere in the fourth quarter of that game, on a mids instruction no less, came out and hit 4 threes, which no one expected. Had a 20-point night. unexpected lift for the Pelicans. He's got talent. He needs to work on his game a lot. He also needs to work on his conditioning, but I think there's enough athleticism there to work with, and he has potential. He played 24 games in his rookie season. He played 61 games the following season, and I think he even made an all-star team that year. His rookie season averaged 22.5 points per game and only 27.8 minutes per game. That's pretty damn efficient. The following season, 27 points per game in 33 minutes. That's Giannis-like numbers, right? I keep on saying that the best ability one can have is availability, and he just hasn't been available. He's played 85 games in his career. It's gone over 3 seasons. And for those, just a reminder at home that they're new to NBA basketball, 82 games in a season. So he's basically played 1 season's worth of games in his NBA career in 3 years. There have been a lot of comps to Charles Barkley. Zion, became popular with a lot of his YouTube mixtapes of all the ferocious dunks. In fact, even a couple weeks ago, when everybody was asking when he was going to come back, he released a video of him, obviously out of shape, but still able to do a between the legs dunk that someone injured should not be able to do, but he did it. He's got athleticism. He still has explosiveness, and he's still young. Again, 21 years old. But the key for him, like you said, is going to be health. There's some comps to Charles Barkley, because Charles Barkley at that age was, granted, a little shorter, slightly different game, but that type of athleticism, that type of explosiveness for a heavier guy, right? The key for Zion Williamson outside of his health is he's going to have to get in the best shape in his life. And otherwise, he's going to be injury prone for the rest of his career. He's going to break bones in his feet. He's going to have knee problems. He's going to have back problems, you name it. And his NBA career is not going to last long if that's not the case. Charles Barkley had Moses Malone in Philly as a young man to tell him that he was fat and out of shape. But there's a lot more accountability back then, because then Barkley wasn't playing. Here, Zion's the number 1 pick, and they're expecting you to play. I think this very well this offseason could be a fork in the road for Zion Williams' career. Either he makes a decision to get himself dedicated and at least put himself in position and try to get himself in the best shape of his life. If he happens to get injured doing that, so be it. But at least try, right? Because I think there is potential there. And the Pelicans are banking on the fact that he has potential. And if he's able to do that, you add him to that squad with Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum, who has 2 years left on his deal after this year. So CJ McCollum is going to be there for a little bit. They have a lot of young rookies that have gained experience in this opening round of the playoffs against the Suns as well. Pelicans are unexpectedly going to be up and coming. And they got a hell of a coach in Willie Green, who's a great leader. If Zion doesn't show that dedication to the game and doesn't show improvement and doesn't show the ability to even make it onto the court, let alone stay on the court, if I'm David Griffin, I'm making calls and I'm trying to trade Zion now for whatever I can get. Not necessarily a 2nd round pick, but you have an up and coming team. You have a young team. That's when you build around Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum and see if you can get a third, 3-and-D guy, a solid player there. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and it's going to be a waiting game, because I do truly think with how much hype is built around Zion still, even though he's barely played more than just 1 NBA season, there's still a lot of hype and mystery around him and what he's going to be. I do truly think the Pelicans will try to retain him, but I don't think they're going to give him this huge contract. I think if there's going to be, obviously, I feel like you have to pay him to keep him, because there are other teams that will potentially match, if not go over, a lowball offer from the Pelicans. But I definitely don't think he's going to get some crazy large contract unless they see something we don't behind the scenes, and they know he's rehabbing his. I'm sure he has to be close to ready to go, at least back to regular training again with some of those dunks and some of those footage. Like the footage we've seen, he looks like he's ready to start getting back into basketball shape and start getting actually ready to play again next season. So if there's stuff behind the scenes that we don't see, I'm not shocked if they do offer him a pretty sizable contract. But I think it's going to take him showing them that he wants to be there for them to offer him a big contract.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure they want to keep him for the sole fact that you hyped him up, you went all in on him. He was the guy you picked. He was your pick. You could have picked some other successful players that were in that same draft class, but you went with this guy.
Ja Morant.
Yeah, that's exactly who I was thinking of. So I personally think that they will try to stick with him. And I think CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Zion could be a scary trio.
Sure.
I think that could be a dominating trio. And if they make it work and if he really shows that he wants it, they very well could be a top 5 seed next season. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think it is if they can be as successful together as I think they can be. But the key is adding that third player to that team, whether that's Zion or not. CJ and Ingram are a great duo, but this is a team that's going to need a trio.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the ball's in the Pelicans' court. And technically, this is a contract year for Zion Williamson. So, like I said, the decision's on him. The Pelicans can either elect to extend him, or they let him walk as a restricted free agent and have the ability to match what any other team offers him. Or if they don't see progress next year, they can go ahead and work to trade him. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens in New Orleans, but it'll also be interesting to see what Zion Williamson decides to do and what type of shape and health he'll have coming into the 2022-23 season. Well, that wraps up another edition of Well Beyond the Arc. Episode 6 is in the books. But these aren't the only projects we have going on. Montana, want to plug your podcast? Other podcasts, I should say.
So I have another podcast called The Connor and Heffernan Show. We actually just released our 5th episode today. A lot of different things. We go over NFL. We cover a lot of the draft. We go over MLB. We go over a little bit of NBA, but I saved most of that for this show. But we went over some NBA, some hockey, and then some college sport news. So it's a little bit of everything. So you can find us at The Connor and Heffernan Show on Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, and for the 6th, I believe, I've said it 6 episodes in a row, Apple, still pending. Got on Amazon just fine, got on everything else, but Apple we're still waiting to get that figured out. So look for us on Apple and also YouTube within the next few weeks. But as of now, we have Spotify, Podbean, and Amazon Music at The Connor and Heffernan Show.
Well, six weeks in a row. We don't want to ruin the pretty impressive streak. Well, I also don't forget to check out my website, my blog, thesportspageblog.com. Just released a new entry today about the uncertain future of Blackhawks All-Stars, Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. Will they be back in the Chicago Blackhawks sweaters next year, or will they be traded in the offseason? Please go to the website and check that out. And as always, please subscribe to the Yankee and the Brit. Check out the other podcasts on the Yankee and the Brit Sports Group. And Doc Rivers, if you're watching this, if you're up 20-some, Joel Embiid's still hurt, don't leave James Harden or Tobias Harris in the game. Take them out. Put in Korkmaz. Put in some of these other guys. No more stars getting injured when you have 25. So long, everybody.